right, everybody, we're going to get started. Thanks for coming, by the way. This seminar is called When Does It Make Sense to Invest in Your Home? The premise of this seminar was dreamt up with giving people the tools of how to look at doing a remodel or doing some sort of investment in your home. My name is Brad Zielinski. I'm the sales manager at Roncor Customer Builders. We are a design build firm, does primarily residential remodeling. Lucas is from US Bank. He's going to be chatting a little bit after me, talking more about different vehicles for lending or things to look into if you are going to be financing a project, and his perspective on what is a good idea and what may not be a good avenue for you. And I'm going to when asked to do this seminar, the reason I came up with this as a topic is we get a lot of questions. In the last 4 or 5 years, it's been a lot more common for people to address us more from a standpoint of what will I get out of the remodel? What's my cost versus value at the end? Am I going to be overbuilding the neighborhood? Questions along those lines, which are really important questions, but what I've realized being a designer is sometimes those can cloud the issues of what it is that you want first. And when a lot of people ask me, well, I'm worried about future resale, and I'd like to build something that's going to be good for a next buyer, I always try to urge people to build for yourself first and then worry about that person second. So I'm going to touch on all those things as far as what sort of mindset to carry into a remodel project, because by no means are those bad questions, but I always urge people to think of yourself first. So I wanted to start off with the idea of just cost versus value. There's two types of ways that we look at this. One is the monetary cost versus value, the straight dollars for dollars, what you're going to put in, what you're going to get out of it. And then there's the emotional cost versus the emotional sort of benefit, or I call it the intrinsic value of a project. That is how is that going to benefit you or your lifestyle, and how is it going to change? Because if you look at remodel projects just from a per cost standpoint, immediately out of the end of that project, you're not going to recoup every single dollar. And in the long term, you will, but there's sort of an upfront cost. So when you're going into it, you got to think of what is it that is going to push me to do this remodel that's worth it, and how long am I going to stay in the house? Because the time in which you're going to stay in your home is very, very important if your main concern is reaping all the dollars out of that initial investment. So this is a slide from Remodeling Magazine. It is and I'm going to zoom in on it a little bit, but it's published by Remodeling Magazine, and what it shows is in Minneapolis what the typical, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you guys can see some of this stuff. It's broken down by the national averages, regional, and then this is obviously the Minneapolis specifically. And it shows generic project costs and what the value is, and that's the day that the project is done. And if you were looking at these numbers, say 10 years ago, they were pretty similar. A lot of the 60 numbers that you saw were more like 75%, and a lot of the 50% numbers were closer to 65%. So even although costs of the projects haven't come down, their value shortly after the fact has reduced a little bit. So when people go into a major remodel, you have to be thinking about, how long am I going to stay in the home so I can recoup that value? And that's usually the conversations that we're having. A lot of people who do remodel projects are in their house for the long haul. So this is much less of an issue. However, if you're thinking of selling your house in the next 5, 6, 7 years, or even 2 or 3 years, you might go into it with a little bit different mindset, and that's why it's important to have the conversations with your either builder or your designer up front to make sure you're maximizing your value out of the project. But just to key in on a few of these, some of them are very intuitive. Like an attic, they're not just they're not in any order as far as the cost recouped. But attic remodel is actually the highest is your entry door replacement. It's a pretty low investment type project, and that gets at the idea of curb appeal, which I'll be talking a little bit later on. That's an important piece of the pie for a future owner, is that snapshot of the original house, and that door is a functional piece that people really get that first impression when they walk in your house. But that's at the top of the list. Other things you'd expect to be up there are things like a attic bedroom remodel. From a from a logical standpoint, it makes a lot of sense that that's at the top of the list, simply because it's space in your house that exists. You don't have to add on to the house to finish it off, and you're going to be adding square footage, therefore adding value to the home. So a lot of these are intuitive on why they recoup the most dollars, but this is a study done by Remodeling Magazine that gives you at least a gauge on if you are deciding between a number of different projects, what's going to be the best thing if that's your primary focus. I'm just going to go back to the full view and move on. So again, touching on the idea of this emotional cost versus the versus value, you might be asking yourself, if I'm not going to get a dollar for dollar return on my money, why would I remodel in the first place? And that's a very appropriate question, one that I always ask people to think about going into it. And it's that idea that there was a short period of time, which is why I'm showing this slide, where there's pretty much anything you could do to your home and you'd recoup those costs and then some. And that was in the last 10 years previous to 2006, when houses were skyrocketing. So if you were in that mindset and had that mindset and that's carried through, we're actually back to where we were before that sort of really fast increase, where houses are still going to appreciate. They appreciate on a much slower timeline, and that's why when you look at major investments, you're thinking, how long am I going to be in the house? If it's X amount of dollars, likely I want to make sure that I'm going to stay here for 5, 10, 15 years to, again, make sure it makes sense for me. And that's, and the reason that people tend to remodel their houses is because if I'm going to be here for 10 or 15 years, I want to enjoy my house in such a way that I'm able to do so. And then at the end of that, not only will I have had the wonderful experience of, this new kitchen or the added square footage that I needed, and now, now that I've enjoyed it for 15, 20 years, I'm at that point where I've recouped all the dollars that I put into it, plus my house is appreciated beyond that. So all things to think about. And I put in there again, build for you. I'm going to say that a lot because it's the most important thing. And back on the, there is the monetary cost of things, but there's also an actual emotional cost in remodeling, and that's something that to think about up front, and that is the physical process of remodeling your house. Being a builder, it's fun for us to do this in every aspect, and I always tell clients that we work with, it's not always going to be fun going through a remodel project. The first couple of few weeks or month or so is really fun because you're excited and things are moving really, really fast, and then about a month and a half later, when you realize I haven't cooked a meal in my kitchen in 6 weeks, I've been eating out, that's where the emotional side of things tend to weigh on you. So that's the obvious downside to doing a remodel, but the value that you get out of it is you're living in a home that now suits your needs. And there are a lot of different reasons why people do remodel projects. Some of it is just a want. There are other need reasons to be doing that, and that's maybe it's I'm resizing and refabricating my home to live in it for the future, rather than think about being in a nursing home. Maybe my house is where I want to have, spend the rest of my life. Or you're looking at it from a standpoint of, I want a house that's maintenance free. And, these are my goals, so that's why I'm going to remodel my house. Or there may be things that you couldn't previously do in your house. A lot of specifically kitchen remodels that we're doing, the impetus to doing that is people want to entertain in their homes, and they don't feel like either the space that they have now is appropriate for doing that, or maybe they're just not proud enough of their home to show it off, and they want to spruce it up a little bit just so they feel like they can have utilize their space for entertaining, because it seems like there's a trend for people and families to spending more time in the home rather than going out and doing more things outside of the house. And then that sort of, that in an essence is the framework that I'm trying to build for the mindset in going into a remodel. The second half of that is making sure whatever project or design of that project, you have a clear idea on goals as far as what are the best things that I can do to make sure my project is going to have that good value, or at the end. There's getting back to that question of, what is good for future resale, or what is a future buyer going to going to want out of a house. And like I said, don't keep that in the forefront of your mind, but it is a good thing to keep on the back burner as far as ways to go through. So, and the way that, you know, I look at it from, just to give you a little bit of my background, I have a Bachelor of Sciences in Architecture as well as a master's degree. I'm now the sales manager there, so I don't do as much design work as I used to, but I still tell, you know, I'm obviously consulting on projects. And when people get into, if you're planning on hiring a professional, it's their job to take you through this process that I'm going to be talking about. But if you're going to be doing this type of stuff on your own, what I'd like to talk about is an approach or a mindset to go into it to build all these things in. Because that's the goal of a design expert, is obviously you want a well-designed project, but you want to build in those things that you know are going to hold up over time. We call it trends versus fads. Fads are something that go away and are popular and then are lost. Trends are things that are recycled, that are never really lost. They may be popular at one point and they may not be as popular, but they're still in style and they're still in your style. So those are important things to be thinking about. And this mindset can be broadcasted to any type of project you're thinking about. And I just thought I'd highlight a few just to give you an idea what I'm talking about. When people are looking into doing a siding project, you could naturally just update your siding so it's maintenance free, replace what's there. We usually go into it with a mindset of, well, curb appeal is a very important thing to a home, and we know that it will indeed add value to the house. So your facade of your house is something a very important piece to think about. You can introduce new textures, whether it be cultured stone, or if you're doing a lap siding, it could be a shake siding. Things like that. Gables and front entry porticos are very common for us to do small additions on the front of the house. Maybe don't cost a whole lot, but will add a lot to that curb appeal. Give some depth to the space and also highlight some different colors and textures and really add to that curb appeal. The other three sides of the house can be, you know, fairly mundane if you want to do the project on a budget, but that facade of the house is that thing that everybody walks up to and your neighbors see and you're going to see, you know, every time you're driving in the driveway. So that's the type of mindset that we go into things. Kitchen is another common place. Obviously there's a lot of design that goes into kitchen because it's the jewel, if you will, of your house. But from my schooling or my school of thought is, it's a functional space, and it's always been a functional space, and it'll always be a functional space. But the idea is to use those particular functions in such a manner that you're highlighting them. I use countertop surfaces as just one simple example. Any standard kitchen will have a uniform countertop height, maybe an island or a peninsula that's a little bit higher. There are a lot of different variety you can put into a kitchen just in that one regard, and it may be bringing a separate function of, I know I'm going to be doing a lot of chopping in one area, so maybe we'll change the surface to maybe a butcher block in one specific area that we know that's going to be done, typically next to maybe a vegetable sink, and then lower the countertop because you have more sort of inertia at that height. So those are the kind of letting form sort of dictate function a little bit, or vice versa, and playing with that. That's, you know, getting at the essence of what a kitchen is and working with those design parameters. And bathroom is the same type of premise. It always was a utilitarian space. Nowadays people are thinking it more of a sanctuary or a place that they want to spend some time in. It's a big flip in regards to the lifestyles that people are leading, so they're putting a lot more thought into what it is they're doing in their bathrooms in that regard. We may be putting in a space that is meant for actually spending some time in the bathroom, whether it be a small reading area that is adjacent to the bathroom that is somewhat connected, or making a larger space so it does feel more inviting. You'll spend more time in there getting ready in the morning and such. And then, green features is another area to if you're planning on hiring a design professional, really make them work for you in regards to working through what it is you want, because there's a lot of hype in the green world. I love it in the sense that it's finally beyond the point of just, I guess, a fad. It's now a real thing that has taken hold, but there's still a lot of things out there where people are using it as a marketing tool to sell a product that may not be in line with what you want. And Lucas will talk more in depth about what green features work for you monetarily and what there are tax credits on. There are also just green features out there that are much more about being environmentally friendly, and that's where you can use any design professional to kind of help you out in that regard. And then I just wanted to take you through sort of the perspective of what an interior designer does versus an architectural designer. Again, so if you're out there doing this on your own, you at least have an idea of where they're coming in at it. And again, if you are planning on hiring a professional, you know how to utilize them the best of your ability. But the way we see it is there is an semblance of detail for an interior designer that works at a sort of a visual level and a peripheral level, and that means that when you walk into a room, there's sort of a feeling or a snapshot that you get that this was assembled as one holistic idea, and you may not notice all the details right away, but it's picking up colors that work with different textures and things like that, and that's really what an interior designer's job is taking the room as a whole and making it all work. And it's difficult to describe, but when we work with realtors, like staging a home, for example, a lot of those projects are carpet, paint, kind of spruce the place up. And again, if you guys are, if you're thinking, you know, I'm going to be selling a house soon, those are probably the type of projects that you're going to be doing. And it's very, very common when either the homeowner or another realtor comes into the space, they know instantly, this was done by a professional. I can tell right away. That's what an interior designer does, and how you can tell is it's going at the room from a more holistic point of view. And also there's an organizational aspect to what they do. They're, through an interior designer, there is a number of products or things that they can access that sometimes you don't necessarily have access to or knowledge about. Our world is kind of daunting in a sense. There's so much variety out there nowadays. It's kind of difficult to weed through what it is you want to do. But that's part and parcel to what an interior designer does, is figure out what your specific styles and tastes are and kind of pare those things down, and then take you to the various showrooms that make the most sense to you. And then architectural designer, the way, you know, again, getting back to having them work for you, think of them as your, you know, financial advisor, but instead for your house. It's very common for, say, example, a kitchen project, for us to go outside the confines of the kitchen to do the work, because it's a lot of, especially Bloomington houses or Richfield houses, they're very compartmentalized. So you have your kitchen space, your dining room, the dinette, the living room, and they're all separate spaces. And it may be, in essence, you may be underutilizing portions of your house that you may not even realize it. The dining room could go unused 9/10 of the year, and then at that large gathering, you fill up the space and use it. Well, that's where an architectural designer is going to have the type of conversations with you and say, okay, is this a space that we can turn into, you know, more of a flexible or a general living space and incorporate that as part of the kitchen? And that way you're utilizing that space more times out of the year, and without having to do an addition or add square footage to your house, you've gained back something that you're not using. And it's a very simplistic way to not truly add space to your house, but add livable space to your lives, essentially. And that's, you know, part of the process. Before any designer is going to put anything on paper, they're going to have a lengthy interview with you as far as collecting what your needs and wants are and figuring out the best way to do that. And that's the fun thing about my job nowadays, is it's more challenging in the sense that people's budgets typically are less than what they have been. So it's just more of a challenging job for us to say, okay, how can we come into this with this mindset and get everything done that we want to achieve without putting the huge addition on your house, because people are just less apt to be doing that. And then the last but probably most important function is the conversations about living in the house for the future. Whenever I enter a project, I always ask people, what are you planning on doing? What are your immediate needs? What's the thing that brought you to me today? Why are you doing this project? Because there's always something that pushes you off the dock in regards to what it is you want to do. And then the easiest thing is to meet those needs. What we really want to do is plan for 5, 10, 15 years down the road, because if you have kids, they grow really fast, and then your needs change, or it could be a multitude of different situations, and we want to try to plan for those things in the future. And it may be a stylistic thing, it may be a different sort of planning type of thing, or it could be something as simple as building in infrastructure for the future too. And when I say that, typically when we do a remodel project, we're tearing down a lot of stuff inside your house, and we're gaining a lot of access. There's a lot of things that we have access to that we wouldn't otherwise have access to, and that's why I urge people to think about what you want in the future, because even if at a very minimal cost, we can bring either electrical or mechanical or plumbing to an area that you might be thinking of doing something in the future. That way it'll make that project build that much more affordable whenever the time comes. So it's all those types of conversations you want to make sure you're having with whomever you're working with to make sure it gets down on paper and is thought of in advance. Because the last thing you ever want to hear after doing any type of project, even if it's the smallest project, is you get done with it all and I really wish I would have done this. I mean, that's the worst situation you can find yourself in. So it's making sure you are given all the information to make informed decisions along the way, whatever you might be thinking of doing. And take advantage of these design professionals. Most companies like ours and our interior designer do consultations, no obligation, no charge. Come out to your house and basically give you ideas and tell you, here from my perspective is the feasibility of doing this project. This is what we think it'll cost, and it'll welcome to the seminar. It's an easy utilization of their services without having to have any sort of investment at all. And as far as knowing exactly when the perfect time, Lucas will talk a little bit more about financing and things like that. But the biggest thing for me, and every single design process, I kind of joke because most people that we deal with happen to be married couples, so I consider myself a marriage counselor. But it's just a little personal joke of mine of what we do is very personal. So it's very important for you to have a trusting relationship with whomever you're going to be working with. And usually you arrive at these types of answers, and it is not, design is not a linear process, it's a cyclical process. So there are a lot of things that will inform your decisions along the way, and there are probably a lot of iterations that you'll go through, whatever the project may be. And you'll probably start very close to where you end up at, but it's about going through the process that allows you to really know that you're making the right decision, because you will have exercised all of the possibilities before you arrive at that one. And that's really the most important thing, is having that comfort level of whatever it is you're going to be doing, because back to that same point I was making before, the last thing you want to do is do a project and then wish you had done something else. And then my last slide is, kind of leading into Lucas a little bit, but talking about costs specifically from a builder's standpoint, and speaking why, now specifically is a good time to be thinking of your remodel projects. For the past 2 to 3 years, costs have really not risen as far as labor and materials. We haven't seen rises like we had in years preceding that, when gas prices were just going out of control. That's when things were really moving up. And in the last 2 or 3 years, we haven't seen that. So it's actually, in that regard, a great time to be thinking about your projects, because things have stayed stagnant for at least 3 years. And many houses have been unattended to in regards to, if you're looking into investment properties, there are a lot of there's a lot of opportunity. And a lot of people's houses also have not been attended to, so I guess that's an opportunity on my side. But but hopefully that's not the case. And money is cheap right now. Lucas will be talking about that, but you know, interest rates are at record lows. So it's a good time to be investing as far as looking into the long term. Having a large sort of mortgage or equity loan at the type of rates that are offered today actually work in your favor as far as watching your house increase in value, because the amount of dollars you'll be spending out will be so much less in regards to the interest of your mortgage. So I'll leave it, turn it over to Lucas.
Thank you, Brad.
Sure.
Microphone hand off here.
Yeah.
So how's everybody doing? I know what you're thinking. The banker's here. It's time to take a little nap. But I don't want this to be boring. I want to just be helpful and open it up for questions. I think Brad really had the great amount of information. But what I really want to highlight is how to really enjoy your remodel. And taking some of the stress out of the financing end of things can really help that enjoyment, I believe. And you know what, I'm not going to lie. Also, banks have managed to give themselves somewhat of a bad name over the last few years. I'm sure everybody in the room can have at least one example of a bad experience you had with a bank. And if you haven't, then that's great. You must be with our bank, right? Some things that have changed. U.S. Bank has gained a lot of recognition lately because we've always been a conservative lender, and that's something that's standing out more now. Because we didn't take some of those risks and we weren't overly frugal with lending like some of the banks were, we're now pushing lending more than anybody else because our cost of the dollar is a lot less than a lot of other banks out there. And so we're being recognized in areas like being named the best leveraged bank in the U.S. over the last 2 years by the government. We are the #1 SBA lender in Minnesota. Some background about myself: I'm a small business specialist for the bank. So the clients of mine are such as Roncor. And what I help with them is getting their clients financed and getting money to you as cheaply as possible so that we can take some of that financial stress off. So some of the things I want to talk about, and please stop me if there's anything that you have questions about or don't agree with. Yeah, bring it up. I want to get some of that aggression out, and hopefully we can get some answers for you. Myths about equity financing that I did want to bring up, even though I deal with businesses mainly now. In the past, what I have done is a regional loan manager for the bank. So I've managed equity financing loans from all over the country. And some things that you hear, and I'm not saying that any of these are unwarranted misconceptions by any means, but I have heard a lot of things that aren't necessarily true. And I can only speak on behalf of our bank, but there are things that I've heard, such as closing costs. Somebody always is going to be deterred from lending when they think they have to pay for it. And especially when it comes to an equity loan or a line. If you think, well, and especially in this market, I'm going to have to go pay for an appraisal just to find out that I'm underwater in my home. Well, that's not the case. And that's one thing that is a huge roadblock for a lot of people before they even start looking into it. They just make that assumption. And the media and other banks have brought this about because a lot of banks do charge for things like that. U.S. Bank, we do not. You can come to us and apply for equity lending, and you're not paying $1 for that. There's no closing costs involved. There's no fees as far as annualization, anything like that. Property type. We also, we can do equity lending on a cabin, a vacation home. Things like that can be utilized as well. A lot of people don't realize that they can utilize equity in multiple areas. The purpose of funds, some people also believe that they have to use an equity loan or line for home improvements, and that's not the case either. You can use your equity for whatever you like. So the big question is, how do you know what is the truth? And I'm not saying any questions are incorrect or not worth asking, but you have to ask your banker. And that's where I want to try to give some information out, but I don't know what those misperceptions are amongst people. So you really just have to ask us, and don't ever feel like it's an unwarranted question by any means. Some ways that we can help you, just as a professional remodeler can help you, is take away some of that stress. Helping you understand lending and how the way it works, whether it be credit, whether the bank, telling you how the bank evaluates you when it comes to lending to you. There's, I'm sure, plenty of instances where you've maybe applied for credit and just been told no, and there's been no explanation. They're not giving you a reason, and it's frustrating. And so that's something that we try to do, is help work with our customers as well. Maybe this isn't the right time, but we can tell you how to get to that point where it is the right time. And that's very important because it helps you use that as ammo for next time that you are applying. Fixed versus variable rates, there are times where I will recommend a variable rate to my client. And that's something that we can explain to you, where that's something that can be very fearful to some people. Prime rate has not changed in almost 3 years now. So that's something that the feds do evaluate quarterly, yes, but for multiple reasons, there are times where I will recommend one or the other. Secured versus unsecured lending, higher versus low payments options. These are all things that we want to discuss with you. Is it better to take on a larger payment right now, or is it better to take interest-only payment options? Because you know that you're going to see the value in this a year down the road, and that's when you're going to be able to pay this off. Helping plan those things out can help take away some of the stress, and that's what we want to be here for you. Another big question nowadays, and I didn't realize, because this is something I deal with every day, I didn't realize how new this was to a lot of my customers until I've been bringing it up recently, is the fact that even if you are underwater in your home and have no option to use equity for lending, that doesn't mean you have to just decide not to do a remodel or put money into your home. We do have purpose finance options now that are completely unsecured. We can lend you up to $25,000 for a home remodel at a fixed rate that are at a competitive rate. We're at about 8.5%, and we include discounts for automatic payments, and there's also a green discount that I'll talk about in a little bit. That those are things that you can utilize. You don't have to have that equity, and that's the market. A lot of times people will look at it as, well, I don't have any equity. That's something I'm not even going to think about right now because I don't have the cash. Well, we can do combinations. We can look at just unsecured options, and that's one that I do have I have literature on. But the big thing is I don't want you to think that that's just going to stop right with equity. That the bank does have other options, and we do want to work with you on those areas. So properly structuring those things is important and can save you a lot of money. These are some of the qualifying green home improvement discounts that you will get, not only on taxes, but with the bank. We'll give you at least a half a point off of that lending because you're utilizing that money to do a green home improvement. So whether it's windows and doors or a non-solar water heater, things like that, EnergyStar.gov/tax credits is going to be the website that you can go to and see all the information about tax credits, things like that. I won't go into all the details there. They do a great job of explaining it. But the big thing to know, go ahead.
Let's say I Googled for you.
Okay.
Thank you. That goes through you guys anyways. It's my school that goes through government.
Okay.
If I do that, I have to show you proof that I put in, let's say, EnergyStar level windows.
Not necessarily. Typically what we'll use is a purchase order, things like that, showing that, yes, this is in fact where the money's going. Yes, some sort of proof, but, and I don't want to get into too much detail about this because it all depends on the situation, but there are times where maybe not all of the lending is going toward a green home improvement, but we're able to apply the discount to the entire loan. So, yes. Yeah, so there are times where we're able to work with you and say, well, you're only spending $5,000 of the $10,000 on, a new HVAC, and the rest is going towards a new deck or a kitchen. Sometimes we're able to apply that discount to the entire loan for you because part of those funds are going towards the home improvement. So I do not want to, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and you mentioned something right before about automatic payment and
Yes.
there. So am I to understand that if you had automatic payment, you get a reduction, you get another reduction if you were doing transactional, you put the two together, is that correct?
Yes. And I believe we can get down to, and I have some more literature there. I believe right yesterday I checked rates, and I believe that 7.5 was the floor that we can get down to for unsecured. But, and I'm not sure exactly what our competitors are, but I know they're nowhere near where we're at for unsecured lending right now. That is one of my jobs, is to know the market, and I have worked for other banks in the past, and I won't say who those are, but I do know I didn't last long there because you have to believe in the services you offer, and that's something that I have at U.S. Bank, and the fact that we're able to work with our customers on finding what the best fit for you. But yes, you're exactly right in combining those discounts. So the automatic payment is...
You said the rate today was 8,
8.5 is where we're
8.5 is where you're at, so you can get a half
After
off
separately
of this,
raised, yep.
and another half combined with ACH down to 7.5, which is equivalent.
The floor. That's where, yes. And so if there are other discounts that do come up down the road, that is the lowest that you're going to get. We do always make exceptions. One way that I will, and I don't want to get too much into this, it's a little off topic, but since it was brought up, U.S. Bank does operate as individual entities much more than other banks. Say Wells Fargo, for example, I have worked for the company in the past. They have, the largest base, they're the largest deposit bank in the country. But they operate, each branch is operated under the same rules and regulations. U.S. Bank operates with a branch president. So each branch is to operate as more along the lines of a community bank, to where we can make some exceptions. We're allowed to work with you, and it's not just, this is our policy, it ends here. We are conservative as far as lending, so there are areas that we will say no to, but we always want you to bring it up, ask us. That's what we're here for. And it is come to a little bit of a trust thing. You have to be able to trust your bank, and I do understand that banks have lost some of that over the last couple of years. But those are all really, really good questions, and please feel free to ask more about that if you'd like. Rates are something that I did just start discussing already, and I feel like as banks have moved less and less on the end of customer service and more on the end of sales. I don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the lines, banks have moved from being a customer service entity into a sales entity. And so the rate is the last thing they want to advertise a lot of times because there's so many gimmicks. Our home equity line of credit rates are as low as 3.99%. That is a variable rate. However, you have up to 3 fixed rate options inside that line. So if you do utilize a large amount, you can lock in that balance under a fixed rate. So you don't have to have that worry of a variable rate option. There are no closing costs or appraisal costs involved. There are no early closure fees with our home equity line of credit. So those are some of the things that, yes, you do see as the small print below a lot of advertisements out there these days, and you do have to be wary about. But we bring those things up front because we stand behind our products, and we want you to know that this is literally the price of money right now is 3.99% for a home equity line of credit. So that's just something I wanted to bring up, is to show you that, like Brad said earlier, money is cheap right now. The last thing I really wanted to touch on is why right now, and I believe it's not only the fact that money is cheap, it's the fact that we are offering things like unsecured lending right now, where in the past that hasn't been offered. And so we're trying to encourage a lot of those things that will help you reinvest in your home. We're reinvesting in the community in a lot of ways, and that's something that really can help take the stress off of just the thought of the financing. I'm sure is always daunting when it comes to remodeling, and that's something we want to try to help out in as much as possible and help you enjoy the remodel. Enjoy your new kitchen, enjoy your new bathroom, enjoy your new home, because that's what it's there for, and that's what you should be doing, is not stressing every night about it, but getting to actually enjoy cooking in that new kitchen. So I don't know if that's going to cover everything, but I did want to open up for some more questions if you had them.
On the unsecured portion is, this credit, that you keep hearing all these things about, well, you're going to have a really good credit score to get loans. Is that credit score thing fit into, I'm assuming it has.
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. And credit score does take a factor in any lending that we do. Anytime you're lending credit, your credit score does factor into that. But I do want you to know, and this is part of understanding how the bank evaluates you, and I'm very glad you brought that up, is that is not the only thing that we base our decision off of. Another big part is how much of your unsecured credit have you already utilized. If you do have maxed out credit cards and maxed out lines of credit already, and you're coming to ask the bank for more credit, that unfortunately, we look at it as a risky situation that could put you in a bad position as well. And so those are some things that we look at as well. Also, what sort of relationship do you have with us already? We want to reward those that have a relationship with us and have been with us for a long time. And that's something that we always want to stand by, because you've been a customer of ours. We want that to be also a large factor when it comes to that lending. That's why we don't give a floor FICO rating that is required for this sort of lending, because that doesn't exist for us. We don't say you have to have this as a requirement. because there's so many other factors that play into that decision. It's not just a number, and we don't want you to think of that you're just a number. So, that's why when you speak with a banker, you can bring this information to us, and we can tell you other things that will help play in your favor. If you are challenged in certain areas such as credit or high balances, we can look at utilizing equity to pay off some of those unsecured cards that you have, things like that, that can leverage your financial position and allow for other lending to exist. So it's not the last straw just because you have a lower credit score or a maxed out credit card. That's not the end all of everything. You want to make sure you have that discussion, bring those things up, and we're more than happy to try to tell you what we can do to work towards improving that. So, was that helpful or was it horribly boring? I don't know. The goal is just to make sure that we want to get new information out there. Banking has changed, and we want to try to get that good name and go more towards helping out the community and helping you reinvest in your home that you love and take some of that financial burden off your shoulders. So please talk to your banker, talk with these guys. They're great. They do a wonderful job, and I'm very happy to be here with Brad and be able to do this because I really support what they're doing, and